Black-eyed peas with smoked ham hocks, pork chitterlings with vinegar and onion, pan-fried catfish, and collard greens with pork fatback. Can you imagine being served each and every one of these steaming, succulent dishes at the same time? Yes, at the same time. Now, this is a typical Sunday dinner for an African American family, what we would like to call soul food. It's safe to assume that I am a young African American woman, and my grandmother was born and raised in Cisco, Arkansas. Now, each and every woman, including my grandmother, at some point in their lives has developed diabetes. So I think it's very important for us to know the effects that this type of food has on the bodies of the culture that consumes it. So today with this speech, I would like to educate you on what soul food is, where it came from, how it affects the bodies of the culture that consumes it, and what can we do to fix this epidemic. First, I would like to talk about soul food. What is soul food? Where did it come from? Well, soul food is just a form of cooking. During the slave trade era, it was introduced to the U.S. through the cookings of West Africans as well as West Europeans. The Europeans had the crops, and the West Africans had the seasonings, that the style, the form of cooking that they made. They mixed those together. During the slave time, food was very scarce, and they had to come up with ways that would feed an entire family as well as a way to bring a family together. So these foods contain things such as fruits and vegetables, um, and some of those, the most popular vegetables is yams, collard greens, and mustard greens. It can contain a lot of pork, as well as fried foods. The word soul food came along in the 1960s during the Black Panther era. The word soul was used to distinguish anything that was African American and everything else that was not. Hence the word soul music, music from the soul of an African American. Soul sister and soul brother. We're related, but in a different type of way. You're my soul sister, my soul brother, and hence the word soul food. Soul food was something that brought families together as well as fed the family as whole. Now, soul food is high in sodium, high in cholesterol, and high in sugar. This is because pork was used in a lot of those dishes because it was the cheapest meat to come by. Um, some of the West Europeans, when they used the pig, they would consume everything except for the snout, the hoof, and the bowels. And the African Americans who were responsible for disposing of these could take these back to their family and incorporate them into their meals, and it didn't cost them anything. Once again, soul food started in the slave era. Food was scarce. They had to feed large amounts of families. They often had people who weren't related, but they were all in that camp together. It was a way to bring everyone together in a tough time. Now, second, I want to talk about what soul food is doing to the bodies of the culture that consumes it. Uh, because the foods are high in fat, sodium, and sugar, it causes culture to have the highest rates of obesity. Um, Negative nutrition causes the body to become sluggish. When the body becomes sluggish, it tells the mind, I want to go to sleep. Now, back in the 1960s and before, people had to work hard to bring home a meal. They either had to plant that meal or they had to go to work. Now, in this day and age where fast food is more accessible, as well as digital media, we have become a very lazy culture. Because the body is becoming sluggish and you decide you want to go to sleep, you are now storing that fat that could be burned off. This leads to diabetes. African Americans tend to hold their weight above the belt. Now, there is no scientific reason why, but most of it is because of the fact that it's high in cholesterol, it's high in sodium, and it's high in sugar. That is usually stored in the midsection. This makes it hard to control diabetes when it's become accepted because more African Americans versus any other culture has diabetes. So because now this disease is accepted, the only thing left to go is death. Comfort food habits have become harder to change. And this is because it gives you a sense of being. It's a way to hold on to tradition. We've gotten used to it and we've accepted what we get from it. Now, finally, I want to talk about what we can do to revise this cultural tradition without getting rid of it. And the first thing, first and foremost, is to educate. We need education on this disease. What is this disease? How can this disease be stopped? How do we get this disease in the first place? So once this knowledge is put into the minds of this culture, then we have no choice but to get rid of it. We got to figure out what to do to make ourselves healthy. No one wants to die from the food that we're eating. We eat food for sustenance. So, secondly, we need to learn and educate the culture on the food pyramid. How much of the fats, how much of the sodium, how much of the cholesterol is needed to make the body operate and function in the proper way. Secondly, we need to introduce exercise, increase activities with this culture. Um, get up off of that couch and burn that pan fried catfish off that stomach. Burn them collard greens off of them thighs. Get that chitterlings up off of them hips. We got to get up, move around, do something so that way we can burn off some of this excess fat that our body decides to store, which makes us sluggish, which increases diabetes into our lives. Thirdly, we can revise these foods. We can have the same foods because soul food often has 2, 3, and 4 vegetables introduced on one plate. You'll also have a protein in beans such as black-eyed peas or great northern white beans. We can lose the fat, reduce the amount of fat that we're using in our food by straying away from the pork and going to vegetable fats. Vegetable fats are lower in fat and easier to burn off. We also can reduce the amount of sodium that we're using in our foods by introducing other seasonings such as paprika or pepper or onion powder as well as garlic powder. And lastly, we can remove sugar completely by using a substitute such as Splenda. Now, I've told you about the history of soul food and how it has affected the African American culture that consumes it. We all have our traditions and our comfort foods in our culture, but I'm sure nobody wants to commit suicide with the foods that we eat. So the next time you hear a black grandmother yell, "Put that pork fat back in them greens," run. That will be your first healthy head start towards the fight against diabetes.